My family laughed when I became homeless. A year later, I bought the building they lived in and evicted them. The crystal-clear chime of the tablet notification sliced through the genteel quiet of Eleanor Vance's sprawling sitting room. At 78, Eleanor moved with a grace that belied her years, her silver hair impeccably coiffed, a wisp escaping just above her left ear, her silk robe rustling softly, a whisper against the Persian rug, as she reached for the device resting on a small, antique mahogany table beside a half-finished crossword puzzle. The morning sun, usually a welcome guest, now seemed to cast a harsh, revealing light on the meticulously arranged room. It was a message from her daughter-in-law Serafina. A familiar knot, a subtle tension began to form in Eleanor's stomach. Her elegant fingers, adorned with a single emerald ring that had been Richard's last gift, tapped open the chat. The screen glowed, illuminating the faint lines around her eyes, etched there by years of quiet observation and unspoken disappointments. Darling Eleanor. The message began, dripping with a saccharine sweetness that Eleanor had long since learned to distrust. It was a sweetness that coated sharp edges, a veneer over self-serving intentions. Just finalizing the last details for our glorious 25th anniversary cruise. Marcus and I are absolutely thrilled. The itinerary is simply divine: Bora Bora, then a private island stay, followed by a week in the Caribbean. So much to see and do. We've booked the exclusive owner's suite, of course, with a private plunge pool and a butler service around the clock. Serafina had even made sure to mention the daily caviar service and the bespoke shore excursions designed purely for their pleasure, all meticulously arranged by a high-end travel concierge. Every detail screamed indulgence, every word a testament to a life lived without fiscal restraint, a life Eleanor knew too well she was entirely subsidizing. Eleanor's lips, usually curved in a gentle, almost wistful smile, tightened almost imperceptibly. She knew the cost of such a trip, not just generally, but down to the very last staggering penny, for she was footing the overwhelming majority of the bill. It was a sum that could have funded a small, impactful charity for a year, providing clean water or education to hundreds, or bought a modest house outright for a deserving young family. Yet, as always, she had readily agreed, her initial hesitation quickly overridden by that persistent, almost childlike hope. She hoped, perhaps too naively, that this grand gesture, this ultimate act of financial generosity, would finally earn her a small measure of the love, inclusion, and genuine appreciation she so desperately craved from her son and his family. She had even hinted, ever so subtly weeks ago, her desire to join them, mentioning her own love for the sea, her fond memories of cruises with Richard. She had imagined sharing a quiet breakfast on deck, watching the sunrise with her grandchildren, a brief, fleeting moment of true connection. She waited. Serafina's message continued, detailing the designer luggage she was purchasing, a full set of Louis Vuitton monogram trunks, the pre-cruise spa treatments at a 5-star hotel, the exclusive private excursions they had planned, including deep-sea diving and helicopter tours over active volcanoes. Not a single word about Eleanor joining. No casual mention of a spare cabin, no polite inquiry about her availability, no feigned regret that it was just a couple's trip. Eleanor felt a familiar ache in her chest, a dull, persistent throb that had become a constant, unwelcome companion over the past 2 decades. It was the ache of repeated disappointment, of unfulfilled longing, of a heart constantly bruised by neglect. She typed a polite reply, her fingers hesitating only for a second before they moved with practiced efficiency, simply asking, "It sounds wonderful, dear. Have you managed to secure a suitable cabin for me?" The question was a fragile kite, sent aloft into a gusting wind, hoping against all reason it would find a safe landing. The reply came almost instantly, as if Serafina had been waiting, poised. A flurry of laughing and winking emojis preceded the text, a superficial shield for the cruel words that followed. "Oh, Eleanor. How sweet of you to ask. But darling, we've just confirmed the last details, and honestly, there simply isn't enough room on this exclusive vessel for another person. And truly, the itinerary is quite strenuous, full of adventurous excursions and late-night galas. It would be far too much for someone your age. We wouldn't want you to feel burdened or, heaven forbid, hold us back from truly enjoying ourselves. We'll send you postcards, though." The final 2 words, a dismissive flourish, sealed the wound. The words hung in the air, echoing in the quiet room. A final poisoned dart aimed directly at the last vestiges of Eleanor's hope. Too strenuous for someone your age. Hold us back. The implication was clear, unambiguous, and brutally delivered. She was old, she was a burden, a hindrance, and despite her immense financial contribution that allowed them such extravagance, she was not welcome. She was merely an ATM, a convenient source of limitless funds, to be drained at will but never truly included in their lives. Her money was desired, her presence was not. A profound stillness settled over Eleanor. The familiar ache in her chest did not intensify. Instead, it evaporated, dissolving into a cold, searing clarity. It was as if a long-held dam, built of years of patience, hope, and self-deception, had finally broken. The vast reservoir of her boundless generosity, her enduring hope for genuine familial love, had finally run dry. She closed her eyes for a moment, the morning light still warm on her face, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek, not of sorrow or self-pity, but of an overwhelming weariness, a deep exhaustion with the charade she had so long maintained. When she opened them again, they held a glint of steel, a dormant strength that had been lying beneath the surface for far too long, waiting for this very moment of absolute recognition. The time for allowing for enduring was over. The time for acting had begun. Across town, in the sprawling suburban mansion Eleanor had largely funded, Marcus Vance, her 52-year-old son, sat on the plush velvet sofa, a faint smell of stale cigar smoke clinging to the cushions. He scrolled idly through luxury car listings on his tablet, his expression one of bored contentment. Serafina, his 50-year-old wife, was excitedly showing off a new diamond tennis bracelet she had just purchased, its brilliance catching the light as she twisted her wrist. It was a casual afternoon, like so many others, filled with the quiet hum of their expensive, effortless lives. They chuckled, sharing a knowing glance, a conspiratorial smile that spoke volumes of their shared disdain for the woman who enabled their existence. "She's probably thrilled we didn't invite her," Serafina mused, adjusting the bracelet on her wrist, her tone laced with a patronizing pity. "Imagine Eleanor trying to keep up with us on the yacht parties. She'd be miserable, honestly. And truly, she just gets in the way of our fun. All her questions and her neediness." Marcus nodded, barely looking up from his screen, already mentally test-driving a new Ferrari. "As long as the money keeps flowing, she's happy. She's too old to do anything else anyway. Best to let her enjoy her quiet life. It's what she prefers." Neither Marcus nor Serafina had any inkling of the seismic shift that had just occurred in Eleanor's elegant sitting room. They were utterly oblivious, lost in their gilded cage of entitlement, basking in the perceived security of their inherited wealth, unaware that the wellspring of their lavish existence had just, silently and irrevocably, been sealed off. They thought they had secured their future. In reality, they had just signed the eviction notice on their entire opulent world. An act of self-sabotage committed with a smile and a flurry of emojis. Eleanor Vance's life had once been a fairy tale, or so it seemed from the outside. She had been the adored wife of Richard Vance, a brilliant industrialist who had built an empire from the ground up, a titan of industry whose name was synonymous with innovation and immense wealth. Richard had been a man of vision, driven by a quiet ambition, who believed in hard work and earned success. Their home, though grand, had always felt like a sanctuary, filled with laughter, intellectual discussions, and a deep, abiding love. When Richard passed away peacefully in his sleep 25 years prior, after a brief, dignified illness, he left Eleanor not just a widow, but the sole inheritor of an unimaginable fortune. A vast portfolio of shrewd investments, sprawling real estate across several continents, and liquid assets that made her one of the wealthiest women in the country. The weight of it had been immense, almost overwhelming, but she had resolved to honor Richard's legacy. Their son, Marcus, had been in his late 20s then, a charming but aimless young man who had never shown much inclination for hard work, preferring instead to dabble in various short-lived hobbies, a brief fascination with photography, a fleeting attempt at gourmet cooking, a short-lived foray into amateur sailing, and enjoy the spoils of his father's success. He possessed a certain charisma, a superficial charm that masked a profound lack of ambition, and a deep-seated sense of entitlement. Eleanor, still reeling from the raw grief of losing her beloved Richard, her anchor, had turned her focus entirely to her son and soon after, his ambitious fiancée Serafina. Serafina, with her sharp wit and even sharper eye for social climbing, had quickly charmed her way into Eleanor's vulnerable heart, presenting herself as the perfect, devoted partner for Marcus, and a loving, respectful daughter-in-law to Eleanor. Eleanor believed, with a devotion only a mother could possess, that her inherited wealth was not just for her own comfort or enjoyment, but a tool to ensure the happiness, security, and future prosperity of her beloved family, the last tangible link to Richard. And so the taps had opened slowly at first, then flowing like an inexhaustible river. Eleanor's generosity was legendary amongst their affluent circle, though it was always understated, never ostentatious on her part. She preferred quiet acts of giving. She had started by paying off the mortgage on Marcus and Serafina's first home, a modest but charming 4-bedroom house in a good neighborhood, a gift meant to give them a solid start. That house, however, quickly became too small for Serafina's burgeoning social ambitions. Eleanor, without hesitation, had then provided the substantial down payment for their sprawling 5-bedroom mansion in the most exclusive part of town, a home that became the stage for Serafina's endless charity galas and ostentatious dinner parties. Eleanor herself had contributed significantly to the interior design, hoping to make it a true family home, only to find her suggestions politely but firmly overridden by Serafina's more modern and chic vision. When Marcus expressed a fleeting interest in classic cars, specifically a vintage Rolls-Royce Silver Cloud, Eleanor had purchased it for his collection, a gleaming symbol of his unearned leisure. When Serafina coveted a new Mercedes-Benz S-Class, a subtle hint about its elegant lines and superior comfort was enough for it to appear in her driveway a week later, fully paid for. This pattern continued, with Eleanor replacing their luxury vehicles every few years. A new Range Rover for Serafina, a high-performance BMW M5 for Marcus, always financed through Eleanor's accounts, always with the leases fully covered, ensuring they always drove the latest models. The ease with which they accepted these gifts, the lack of even a perfunctory thank you, had always stung a little, a tiny splinter in her heart. Her grandchildren, Marcus and Serafina's 2 children, Isabella and Liam, were the apple of Eleanor's eye, the bright spots in a sometimes lonely existence. She doted on them, believing that an elite education was paramount to their future success. She paid their tuition fees without fail, from their earliest days at the most prestigious private preschools to their current enrollment in an exclusive boarding school renowned for its Ivy League admissions rate. These fees alone amounted to hundreds of thousands of dollars annually, a sum that would cripple most families. But for Eleanor, it was an investment in their future, a testament to her boundless love, a hope that they would achieve the greatness Marcus never pursued. She bought them designer clothes, the latest trends from European fashion houses, lavish toys, top-of-the-line electronics, and once, for Isabella's 16th birthday, a fully restored vintage convertible, a vibrant red beauty, much to Serafina's delight, who often used it herself for her own errands and social engagements. Eleanor remembered the day Isabella received the car, her delighted squeal, followed by Serafina's quick suggestion that Granny should really see how much fun it is to drive. Eleanor had only smiled, a little sadly. Vacations were another realm where Eleanor's largesse knew no bounds. Every year, sometimes twice a year, she would fund extravagant family trips. First-class flights to the Maldives, private villa rentals in Tuscany, skiing holidays in the Swiss Alps with personal instructors, safaris in Africa complete with luxury tents and private game drives. All meticulously planned and fully funded by Eleanor. She yearned for these trips to be a time of genuine family bonding, a chance to create cherished memories, to feel like the matriarch of a loving, united clan. Yet, increasingly she found herself an afterthought. She would be relegated to a less desirable room, perhaps one without a view, or subtly left behind during excursions deemed too adventurous or too strenuous for her. While Marcus and Serafina flaunted their sponsored lifestyle on social media, their carefully curated posts never acknowledging the true source of their opulence. Eleanor would watch from afar, a quiet ache in her heart, as they posted pictures of their children laughing, of themselves clinking champagne glasses against breathtaking backdrops, the vibrant scenes a stark contrast to her solitary moments in a luxurious hotel suite, reading a book or watching television. She remembered one trip to Paris, where she had longed to visit the Louvre, but Marcus and Serafina had insisted she stay at the hotel, claiming the queues would be too much for her, while they went off to exclusive fashion shows and Michelin-starred dinners. She asked for so little in return. Not financial reimbursement, for she had more than enough. Not even effusive thanks, though a sincere word of gratitude would have been a balm to her soul, a small acknowledgement of her efforts. All she truly desired was their love, their respect, and their inclusion in their lives. She wanted to be invited to family dinners, to be consulted on important decisions, to feel cherished, not just tolerated, not merely seen as a walking vault. She wanted to be a part of their lives, not just the financier of them. But as the years turned into decades, the family's entitlement grew as vast and unyielding as Eleanor's fortune. Marcus never found a career path, content to manage his mother's investments in name only, while truly doing nothing more than approving what Mr. Henderson suggested. He spent his days on the golf course, at exclusive clubs, or researching the latest luxury gadgets, all funded by Eleanor. He spoke of business ventures that never materialized, of potential partnerships that always fizzled out, and Eleanor, ever hopeful, had always provided the initial capital, only to watch it vanish. Serafina, meanwhile, perfected the art of the social climb, her calendar filled with luncheons, charity events where she was always on the host's committee, a position Eleanor's money bought, and exclusive shopping trips. Her entire identity was built on the facade of immense wealth, a facade meticulously maintained by Eleanor's funds. She became a caricature of the idle rich, her life a performance of curated luxury. Their disrespect became increasingly overt, a casual cruelty that stung Eleanor deeply, each instance a small cut. She would overhear them mocking her behind her back. "Eleanor so old-fashioned, she still pays with checks. Can you imagine?" Or, "She really needs to get out more, she's so lonely, bless her heart." The pity in their voices was often more hurtful than outright anger. They excluded her from family events, often making plans for holidays or birthdays without even informing her until the last minute, if at all. Eleanor had once arrived at their mansion for what she thought was a casual Sunday lunch, only to find the entire family, extended relatives included, preparing to leave for a surprise beach trip, and she had simply been forgotten. Isabella and Liam, growing up amidst this culture of entitlement, learned by example. They treated their grandmother with a polite indifference, seeing her as the dispenser of lavish gifts and tuition fees rather than a person with feelings and a lifetime of wisdom to share. Birthday calls were perfunctory, holiday visits brief and focused on what gifts they might receive, their attention already drifting. Eleanor remembered the Christmas 2 years ago. She had meticulously planned a grand family dinner at her mansion, hoping for a festive, intimate gathering, a return to the warmth she remembered from Richard's time. She had hired renowned caterers, decorated her home with exquisite taste, and bought thoughtful, personalized gifts for everyone, spending weeks researching their interests. An hour before dinner, Marcus called, sounding bored, a hint of impatience in his voice. "Mom, we're just too exhausted. Serafina has a migraine. The kids are tired too. We've decided to just order in pizza. Maybe next year, okay?" Eleanor had spent Christmas Eve alone, the magnificent feast she had prepared for her family slowly growing cold in her grand dining room, the festive decorations a mocking testament to her solitude. Another time, Serafina had decided to renovate the entire west wing of their mansion, a project costing millions. She had presented Eleanor with the architect's plans and the eye-watering budget, Not for approval, but for funding, as if it were a mere formality. Eleanor had gently suggested a slightly less extravagant option, perhaps reusing some of the perfectly fine existing furniture, or considering a more modest design. Serafina had cut her off, her voice laced with thinly veiled contempt, a condescending tone that made Eleanor's blood run cold. "Eleanor, darling, you wouldn't understand. This is about our brand. This is about maintaining appearances. It's a necessary investment for our social standing. And frankly, your taste is a little dated. We can't have the Fosters thinking we're cutting corners." Eleanor, wounded to her core by the casual dismissiveness of her taste and the open declaration that her money was for their brand, had simply signed the check, the pen feeling impossibly heavy in her hand. Eleanor had tried to talk to Marcus, to express her feelings, her loneliness, her desire for genuine connection, for him to simply see her. He would always brush her off, distract her with a new financial request, or feign a busy schedule. "Mother, you know how much we love you. We're just so busy, you understand. Running a family like ours, it's a full-time job. But we appreciate everything you do for us, truly." The words were hollow, devoid of any real emotion. A rehearsed script designed to placate and dismiss. He had mastered the art of polite evasion, always promising to visit, always too busy to follow through. She had endured it all year after year, clinging to the hope that one day, they would see her, truly see her, not just for her money, but for the loving, generous woman she was. She had convinced herself that her sacrifice was for their happiness, that their lavish lives were a reflection of her boundless love, a monument to Richard's legacy. She told herself that their occasional perfunctory visits or brief superficial phone calls were enough, that this was simply the way things were with busy, successful people. But deep down, a gnawing resentment had begun to take root, a quiet fury at the systematic emotional draining she had allowed, the constant erosion of her dignity. Now, as Serafina's cruelly dismissive message about the cruise settled irrevocably in her mind, the last illusion shattered into a million pieces. It wasn't about her age or the strenuous itinerary, or their genuine concern for her well-being. It was about their desire to have her money without her presence, to consume her generosity without the slightest inconvenience of her company. It was the ultimate act of transactional contempt, a stark declaration that she was nothing more than an ATM, to be used and then discarded, a source of endless supply with no claim to a seat at the table. And Eleanor, the doting, suffering matriarch, finally understood the full, bitter truth. The time for suffering was over. The time for consequences had begun. With a newfound resolve that settled deep in her bones, a cold, hard certainty that banished all lingering doubt, Eleanor picked up her landline phone, a vintage model she preferred for its solid feel and familiar weight. Her hand was steady, her voice clear, infused with a quiet power. The slight tremor that had often accompanied her calls to Marcus or Serafina, born of anxiety and a desperate hope for their affection, was conspicuously absent. This was no longer a plea, it was a directive. Her first call was to Mr. Henderson, her longtime financial advisor, a man who had managed the Vance family's vast portfolio for decades. He was a discreet, impeccably dressed man in his late 60s, known for his unwavering loyalty and financial acumen. He answered on the second ring, his voice warm and professionally solicitous. "Eleanor, good morning. To what do I owe the pleasure? I trust everything is well." "Good morning, Mr. Henderson," Eleanor replied, her voice calm, almost detached, like a surgeon preparing for a delicate but necessary operation. "I need you to do something for me. Immediately and without question. I want all financial support to Marcus Vance and his family ceased. Effective immediately." Mr. Henderson paused, a slight bewilderment seeping into his tone, quickly followed by concern. He had known Eleanor's generosity was immense, but this was unprecedented. "Eleanor, are you quite well? All financial support? You mean the monthly allowances, the mortgage payments for their various properties, the car leases, even Isabella and Liam's tuition?" "Everything, Mr. Henderson," Eleanor affirmed, her voice unwavering. each word a hammer blow striking the final nail into the coffin of her past life. Every single payment, every direct debit, every allowance, every credit card attached to my accounts, every future payment, including the remainder of the cruise payment for Marcus and Serafina. I want all their access to my funds revoked. I want their credit cards issued under my family account canceled. Any mortgages or leases I am currently paying, I want those payments stopped. If they wish to retain those assets, they will need to take over the payments themselves. I believe you have all the necessary details. Please ensure this is handled with the utmost discretion and efficiency, Mr. Henderson. I expect no delay. Mr. Henderson, a seasoned professional who had witnessed the quiet erosion of Eleanor's spirit over the years, recognized the steel in her voice, a resolve he had never heard before. He had known Eleanor for years, had seen her enduring patience and boundless generosity towards her undeserving family. He also knew the Vance family's opulent lifestyle, entirely propped up by Eleanor's wealth, a precarious house of cards built on her largesse. He understood implicitly that something monumental, something irreversible, had shifted within his long-suffering client. Understood, Eleanor. I will action this immediately. There will be significant repercussions for them, you understand. A considerable upheaval. I do, Mr. Henderson, Eleanor said, a faint, almost imperceptible ghost of a smile touching her lips, a satisfaction that was not malicious but deeply earned. That is precisely the point. She hung up the phone, a quiet hum filling the line, a sound that felt like peace. Her next call was to Ms. Albright, her personal attorney, a sharp, formidable woman in her 50s, known for her no-nonsense approach and razor-sharp legal mind, who handled all of Eleanor's legal affairs. Again, Eleanor relayed her instructions with the same calm precision, the same unshakable conviction. Ms. Albright, I need you to draft and send immediate legal notices to Marcus and Serafina Vance. All power of attorney I have granted them for any of my assets, or for their financial affairs that I have previously managed, is revoked. All agreements for financial support, informal or otherwise, are terminated. I want it made clear that I will no longer be responsible for any of their debts or expenditures from this moment forward. And should they attempt any legal action or challenge this decision, I expect you to defend my position rigorously. I foresee no successful challenge, but I trust your judgment. Ms. Albright, known for her unwavering stoicism, allowed herself a brief, sharp intake of breath, a tiny gasp of surprise that Eleanor almost missed. She knew the extent of Eleanor's financial support for the Vance family, the sheer volume of transactions. Eleanor, this is a drastic measure. Are you absolutely certain? The implications are far-reaching. I have never been more certain of anything in my life, Ms. Albright, Eleanor replied, her voice firm, leaving no room for doubt or negotiation. It is time they learned to stand on their own 2 feet, to understand the value of honest effort. And it is time I reclaimed my own life, my own peace. Please proceed with all due haste. Over the next few days, Eleanor observed the quiet, almost invisible efficiency of her trusted professionals. Bank accounts were systematically frozen, credit limits zeroed out, direct debits canceled, and formal legal notices dispatched via courier and certified mail, ensuring receipt. The financial tap, which had flowed like a boundless river for decades, was now a trickle, then a drip, then utterly, irrevocably dry. Eleanor felt a quiet sense of liberation with each passing hour, as if a great weight was being lifted from her shoulders, a suffocating blanket finally removed. She spent her days reading, tending to her garden, and enjoying the serene quiet of her home, a quiet she had not fully appreciated in years. The first ripple of panic struck Marcus and Serafina 3 days later, as subtly as a pebble dropping into a vast, still pond. Serafina was at her favorite high-end boutique, Elegance & Company, on the city's most exclusive shopping street, selecting a new designer handbag, a limited-edition crocodile skin tote she had been eyeing for weeks, confident in the boundless spending power of Eleanor's platinum credit card. She handed it to the sales assistant with a flourish, a practiced air of nonchalance. A few moments later, the assistant returned, a slight frown on her perfectly made-up face, her polite smile faltering. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Vance, but this card has been declined." Serafina laughed, a tinkling, dismissive sound that bordered on scorn. "Declined? Nonsense. That's impossible. It must be a system error. Try it again. It's Eleanor Vance's account, it's limitless. Perhaps you typed the number incorrectly." The assistant tried again, her expression unchanging, a hint of unease now in her eyes. "Still declined, Mrs. Vance. The system indicates the account has been closed." "Completely." Serafina snatched the card back, her face reddening with a combination of embarrassment and growing fury. "Closed? That's utterly impossible. My mother-in-law would never. This is a mistake. I'll call the bank immediately." She stormed out of the boutique, fuming, leaving the bewildered sales assistant and a trail of unspoken judgment in her wake. Her initial calls to Eleanor's personal number went straight to voicemail, a polite, pre-recorded message that offered no answers. She tried Eleanor's house phone, but it rang unanswered, a hollow mocking sound. Later that day, Marcus attempted to pay for his weekly golf club dues, a standing charge he never thought about, only to find his card also declined. He dismissed it, assuming Serafina had maxed out their shared family account with her latest shopping spree. He tried another credit card Eleanor had provided for his business expenses, a separate card for his theoretical ventures. Declined. A cold, unfamiliar knot began to form in his stomach, a prickle of unease he hadn't felt in years. He called Serafina, who was already in a state of barely contained hysteria. The next morning, the real panic, raw and visceral, began to set in. Serafina received a terse, official email from the elite boarding school their grandchildren attended. "Dear Mrs. Vance, we regret to inform you that the tuition payment for Isabella Vance and Liam Vance due yesterday has not been received. As per our policy, we must insist on immediate payment to avoid disruption to their education and potential suspension." Serafina immediately forwarded it to Marcus, adding in capital letters, a desperate, shrieking demand. "What is going on? Call your mother. Now." Marcus called Eleanor again, his tone now laced with urgency, desperation, not boredom. Still voicemail. He tried Eleanor's house phone, letting it ring interminably, but still no answer. He called Mr. Henderson's office. Mr. Henderson's assistant politely informed him that Mr. Henderson was unavailable and would return his call when he could, a phrase that sounded suspiciously like a brush-off. He called Ms. Albright's law firm. Her secretary, equally polite and equally unhelpful, informed him that Ms. Albright was in meetings all week and could not be disturbed for any reason. A chilling realization began to dawn on him. They were being deliberately cut off. Then came the deluge of registered letters, formal and unforgiving. Notices from the bank, stating that the mortgage payments for their primary mansion, their exclusive vacation home in Aspen, and their lavish beach house in Malibu had been stopped due to non-payment from the primary account holder. Notices from the luxury car dealerships, informing them that their lease payments were severely overdue, and that vehicles were subject to immediate repossession. Notices from utility companies, threatening service disconnection for their multi-million-dollar mansion. Their carefully constructed opulent world, which had seemed so solid, so eternal, so untouchable, was beginning to show deep, irreparable cracks. Serafina, usually so composed, so polished, was shrieking into her phone, her carefully manicured hands tearing at her hair, attempting to activate secondary credit cards she hadn't even known existed, all of which were now defunct. Marcus paced their immense living room, his face pale, his hands shaking, running them through his perfectly styled hair, his mind racing with possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. "She's gone mad," Serafina wailed, throwing her phone onto the plush carpet, the sound swallowed by the thick pile. "What has she done? She's cut us off. Everything. How could she? We'll be ruined." Marcus, for the first time in his pampered life, felt a cold dread that went beyond mere inconvenience or irritation. He saw the potential for the entire edifice of his comfortable, effortless existence to crumble into dust. This isn't like her. She's never done anything like this before. She must be having a breakdown. The stress of her age may be. We need to go see her. We need to make her understand what she's doing to us. The thought that Eleanor, his gentle, generous mother, could be capable of such a calculated, devastating move was unthinkable. It was unbearable. There was only one option left. Confront her directly. The sleek black Mercedes-Benz S-Class, still technically under Eleanor's lease, a vehicle that had ferried them in cushioned comfort for years, screeched to a halt in front of Eleanor's elegant, ivy-clad mansion. Marcus and Serafina practically tumbled out, their faces contorted with a mixture of fury, disbelief, and a nascent stomach-churning terror. They stormed up the manicured pathway, past the fragrant rose bushes Eleanor had tended for decades, Marcus hammering on the solid oak front door with an aggressive, desperate rhythm, while Serafina jabbed at the doorbell repeatedly, a frantic, discordant chime. Eleanor, who had been enjoying a cup of Earl Grey tea in her sun-drenched conservatory, a book of poetry open on her lap, heard the commotion. She had anticipated this. It was inevitable, the final act in a long, painful play. She took a slow, deep breath, a sense of calm resilience settling over her, a quiet strength she hadn't known she possessed. She placed her teacup carefully on its saucer, marked her page and walked to the door, her silk robe rustling softly, her posture regal. She opened it, her expression serene, almost welcoming, devoid of any anger or fear. Just a quiet, unwavering detachment. Marcus. Serafina. To what do I owe this urgent visit? She asked, her voice even, a gentle ripple in the otherwise still air, utterly devoid of warmth, but also of any overt anger. Serafina, her eyes blazing with a wild, unhinged fury, pushed past her, invading Eleanor's personal space. What have you done, Eleanor? What is wrong with you? Our cards are declined. The school is calling about tuition. The bank says the mortgage payments have stopped. Are you insane? Her voice was shrill, close to a scream. Marcus, trying to maintain some semblance of control, his own panic warring with his desire to appear rational, stepped forward, his suit rumpled, his face pale. Mother, this isn't funny. What kind of cruel game are you playing? You're jeopardizing everything. Isabella and Liam's education, our homes, our entire lives. We'll be on the street. Eleanor closed the door softly behind them, the click of the latch echoing loudly in the tense silence. She gestured towards the sitting room, inviting them further, but they remained standing, agitated, their eyes darting around the familiar, yet suddenly alien room. Eleanor calmly settled into her favorite armchair, the one where she had spent so many lonely evenings. I assure you there is no game being played, she stated, her voice quiet but firm, resonating with an undeniable authority. And I am perfectly sane. What I have done, as you so dramatically put it, is simply ceased all financial support to you both. Permanently. The words hung in the air like a death knell, cold and absolute. Serafina gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her face paling to an ashen white. Marcus's jaw dropped, his carefully constructed composure crumbling. Permanently. Marcus sputtered, regaining his voice, which now shook not with fear, but with outrage, a profound sense of betrayal. You can't do that. We're your family. Your only son. You have a moral obligation to us. To your grandchildren. A moral obligation? Eleanor's eyes, usually soft with a gentle, enduring sadness, hardened to chips of emerald ice. Let us discuss moral obligations, Marcus. Let us discuss the decades of moral obligation I have fulfilled while you and your wife have systematically bled me dry, offered me nothing but contempt, casual cruelty, and absolute exclusion in return. Her voice, though steady, vibrated with years of suppressed pain and resentment, a lifetime of unspoken hurt finally finding its release. Serafina scoffed, a brittle, dismissive sound. Contempt? Exclusion? We love you, Eleanor. We're just busy. You're old, you don't understand the demands of our lives. We're always out there socializing, maintaining our image. It's exhausting, Eleanor. My image. Eleanor's voice rose slightly, but remained controlled, a quiet storm brewing beneath the surface. My image, Serafina, was built by my husband's hard work, by his integrity and vision, not by your ostentatious parties funded by my sorrow and my unending generosity. Let me enumerate the moral obligations I have met, the financial demands I have fulfilled without question, for decades. I paid off your first mortgage, then provided the substantial down payment for this monstrosity of a mansion you now inhabit, a home I have continued to pay the mortgage on for over 20 years, never once asking for a key, let alone a say in its upkeep. I have replaced your luxury cars every few years. A Mercedes, a Range Rover, a BMW, all paid for, and leased under my name, ensuring you always had the latest models. I have funded your children's elite private education year after year, to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars, ensuring their place at the most exclusive institutions, while you barely attend their school plays, let alone their parent-teacher conferences, always too busy with your social obligations. She continued, her gaze unwavering, listing each transgression, each financial drain with chilling precision, as if reading from a meticulously kept ledger. I have paid for your extravagant vacations, the Maldives, Aspen, Tuscany, safaris in Africa, holidays I was often either excluded from entirely or relegated to the sidelines, left alone in a hotel room, while you paraded your supposed wealth on social media, never once acknowledging the true source. I have given you, Marcus, a generous monthly allowance that far exceeds what most people earn in a year, money you use to support a life of leisure, not industry. And you, Serafina, an unlimited credit card for your endless shopping sprees and charity events, which were nothing more than social opportunities for you to flaunt my money, to climb a ladder that was built on my back. I have funded your every whim, your every desire, your entire existence of indolence and social climbing, expecting nothing but a modicum of kindness. Her voice, though steady, vibrated with years of suppressed pain, with the weight of her sacrifices. And what did I ask for in return? Love, respect, inclusion, a phone call that wasn't solely about money, a dinner invitation that wasn't an afterthought, a grudging obligation, to be treated as a mother, as a grandmother, as a human being with feelings and needs, not merely an inexhaustible ATM. Instead, I received mockery, exclusion, and dismissive pity. You openly laughed at me behind my back, made decisions about my life without consulting me, and systematically cut me out of the very family I had spent my fortune supporting. You consumed my life force. Serafina tried to interrupt, her voice high-pitched with feigned indignation, tears of self-pity springing to her eyes. How dare you, Eleanor? We're your family. We took care of you. We visited. We called. Took care of me? Eleanor's eyes flashed with a steely fire that stunned them both into silence. You took my money. You consumed my life force. You planned a grand cruise entirely funded by my money, my gift to celebrate your milestone, and then told me there was no room, and that I was too old and would hold you back. That, Serafina, was the final insult. The very last straw that broke the camel's back. Marcus, seeing that emotional manipulation was failing spectacularly, tried a different tactic. He dropped to his knees, a theatrical gesture, clutching Eleanor's hand, his eyes welling up with practiced crocodile tears. Mother, please. I beg you. Don't do this. We'll change. We'll be better. We'll include you in everything. We'll move in with you. We'll take care of you. Just don't leave us destitute. You can't throw your own son out on the street. His voice was choked with feigned emotion. Eleanor gently but firmly pulled her hand away, her touch as cool as marble. You have made your choices, Marcus, for decades, and I have made mine. My decision is final. You are no longer my financial responsibility. The time for begging and false promises is long past. You have reaped what you have sown. Serafina, seeing Marcus's desperate plea fail, resorted to threats, her face contorted with malice. If you do this, Eleanor, we'll expose you. We'll tell everyone you're a cruel, heartless old woman who disowned her own family. Your reputation will be ruined. You'll be a pariah. Eleanor merely raised an eyebrow, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. My reputation? My dear, my reputation is built on integrity, on a lifetime of quiet dignity and genuine generosity, even to those who proved themselves utterly unworthy. Yours, however, is built on a facade of borrowed wealth, on a carefully constructed illusion. Let us see whose reputation truly suffers when the truth of your dependency and indolence comes to light. She stood, her posture regal, her voice now carrying an undeniable authority that brooked no argument. Now, I believe this conversation has run its course. You are no longer welcome to drain my resources, nor my emotional energy. You may leave. Marcus and Serafina stared at her, utterly defeated, their faces a mask of shock and dawning horror. The woman before them was not the doting, easily manipulated matriarch they had known. This was a stranger, a force of nature they had foolishly awakened through their own greed and contempt. The icy resolve in her eyes, the unwavering firmness of her voice, left no doubt. Her decision was absolute, irrevocable. Their opulent world, built entirely on her generosity, was not just crumbling. It was being systematically dismantled brick by painful brick, right before their very eyes. They had walked into the lion's den, and the lion, having finally awoken, was no longer willing to be caged or milked dry. They turned and stumbled out, the front door closing softly behind them, a definitive click that echoed the finality of their new reality. Marcus and Serafina stumbled out of Eleanor's mansion, their faces ashen, their rage mixing with a cold, paralyzing fear that gripped their very souls. The grand facade of their lives, which Eleanor had so meticulously detailed, was no longer theirs to maintain. The silence in the Mercedes as Marcus drove away was heavy, suffocating, punctuated only by Serafina's sporadic, choked sobs, more of frustration than genuine sorrow. They had nowhere to go, no one to turn to, and for the first time, no money to buy their way out of their predicament. The immediate fallout was swift and brutal, a cascade of consequences that stripped away their gilded existence layer by agonizing layer. Within days, the bank issued formal foreclosure notices on their primary mansion, the sprawling Aspen chalet, and the sun-drenched Malibu beach house. The luxury car dealerships, relentless in their pursuit of overdue payments, repossessed the gleaming black Mercedes-Benz S-Class, the imposing Range Rover, and even Marcus's prized BMW M5, the one he had meticulously customized. The carefully curated fleet of luxury vehicles, a tangible symbol of their status and freedom, vanished overnight. Marcus was forced to borrow an old, beat-up, sputtering sedan from a reluctant friend, a humiliating experience for a man who had never driven anything less than top-tier. The faint smell of stale cigarettes in the upholstery a stark contrast to the scent of fine leather he was accustomed to. The children, Isabella and Liam, were pulled from their elite boarding school. The headmaster, polite but firm, informed Serafina that without the substantial tuition payments, their enrollment could not continue, citing school policy and outstanding balances. They were forced to transfer to the local public high school, a jarring transition from manicured campuses, personalized attention, and small class sizes to overcrowded classrooms, unfamiliar social hierarchies, and a distinct lack of bespoke services. Isabella, who had always been the undisputed queen bee among her private school peers, found herself adrift and resentful, her designer clothes clashing starkly with the more modest attire of her new classmates. Her social standing evaporated. Liam, who had dreamt of an Ivy League future, now faced the crushing reality that his academic prospects had been severely curtailed, his carefully laid plans for a privileged future crumbling before his eyes. He felt a deep, unfamiliar sense of panic and anger. Their social circle, once so vibrant and effusive, began to dissipate like mist in the morning sun. Friends who had eagerly attended Serafina's lavish parties, who had accepted their expensive gifts and enjoyed their exotic vacations, suddenly became busy. Invitations stopped arriving. Phone calls went unreturned. The gossip spread like wildfire through their exclusive community, fueled by the repossessions and the sudden lack of lavish spending. The Vance family was no longer Eleanor's heirs. They were on their own, and their immense wealth had evaporated, revealing the hollow core of their existence. Serafina's carefully cultivated image as a philanthropic socialite, built on borrowed grandeur, crumbled, revealing the grasping materialistic woman beneath. She found herself ostracized, whispered about, no longer a coveted guest but a cautionary tale, a social pariah. Marcus, utterly clueless about generating income, floundered spectacularly. He tried to invest in various dubious schemes, desperate to recoup his losses, losing what little savings he had managed to squirrel away from Eleanor's allowances, a meager sum compared to his previous spending. He attempted to leverage his connections, only to find that those connections had been built solely on his mother's money, and without it, he was irrelevant, a man with no actual skills or influence. He tried to get a job, something he had never truly done in his entire life, and found himself completely unqualified for any position beyond basic manual labor, a prospect that filled him with absolute horror. The idea of waking up before noon, of working 8 hours a day, of earning a modest salary, was an alien concept that filled him with dread and disgust. Serafina, equally inept at anything resembling actual work, tried to start an online boutique, hoping to capitalize on her eye for fashion, which failed miserably due to her complete lack of business acumen, her inability to manage inventory, and a profound misunderstanding of market dynamics. She spent her days resentfully cleaning their modest apartment and complaining bitterly about their diminished circumstances, about the unfairness of it all, about Eleanor's supposed cruelty. Her frantic attempts to maintain a semblance of her former life were pathetic, a desperate clinging to a past that was rapidly fading into an unreachable dream. They were forced to move out of their grand mansion, unable to pay the mortgage or even the prohibitive maintenance costs. They ended up in a modest, cramped rental apartment on the outskirts of town, a stark, humiliating contrast to the opulence they had once commanded. The constant bickering, the bitter blame, the desperate attempts to contact Eleanor, all met with impenetrable silence, wore them down, eroding their fragile relationship. Meanwhile, Eleanor Vance, having finally shed the immense, suffocating burden of her family's financial and emotional demands, began to truly live for the first time in decades. The day after their furious confrontation, she called her oldest friend, Martha, a woman with whom she had shared laughter and secrets before Marcus and Serafina's insatiable demands had consumed her life, pushing everyone else to the periphery. "Martha, darling," Eleanor said, her voice light, infused with a genuine unburdened smile. "How would you like to finally take that trip to the Scottish Highlands we always talked about? The one with the charming bed and breakfasts, and the long walks along the lochs? My treat, of course." Martha, surprised and utterly delighted, readily agreed, hearing the profound change in Eleanor's voice. Eleanor, for the first time, planned a trip solely for herself and a dear friend, without considering anyone else's preferences or schedules, free from the need to impress or placate. She booked charming boutique hotels, not lavish, impersonal resorts. She planned visits to ancient castles and serene lochs, spent hours in small, independent bookshops, not frantic shopping sprees in designer boutiques. She felt a lightness she hadn't known was possible. She started revisiting hobbies she had abandoned years ago, buried under layers of obligation and requests. Painting, a passion she had set aside to manage her family's endless financial requests, now blossomed anew in her studio. Classical music concerts, which she now attended regularly, savoring every note, and quiet evenings reading by the fireplace, free from the constant anxiety of their next demand. She reconnected with old friends, joined a book club, and even began volunteering at a local animal shelter, finding immense joy and unconditional affection in caring for creatures who simply offered love in return. Her home, once a silent monument to her solitude, now buzzed with a quiet, contented energy. The weight of expectation, of disappointment, had lifted. She felt lighter, freer, more vibrant than she had in years, truly herself for the first time since Richard's passing. The laughter she now shared with Martha, the simple pleasure of a quiet afternoon with a good book, the contented purr of a rescued cat on her lap, these were the true riches, far more valuable than any sum of money she had ever spent on her undeserving family. A year later, the landscape of Eleanor Vance's life, and that of her estranged family, was irrevocably altered, the chasm between them wider than ever. Eleanor at 79 was thriving, her eyes bright, her step nimble. She had embraced her newfound freedom with an almost youthful exuberance, shedding the burdens of the past like an old skin. She had traveled extensively, not to exclusive isolating resorts, but to places of historical significance and natural beauty, immersing herself in local cultures, learning new phrases in different languages, and making friends who genuinely valued her for her intellect, her kindness, and her compassionate spirit, not her bank account. She had rekindled her passion for art, enrolling in an advanced painting class where her canvases bloomed with vibrant colors and bold, confident strokes, mirroring the new vitality within her. She dedicated a significant portion of her immense wealth to various charities, particularly those supporting education for underprivileged children and animal welfare, finding profound satisfaction in truly making a tangible difference in the world, a stark, fulfilling contrast to the bottomless, self-serving pit of her family's demands. She was happy, genuinely, deeply happy, a state of being she hadn't fully experienced in decades, a contentment that radiated from her. One crisp autumn morning, a year after the Great Confrontation, Eleanor received an email from Ms. Albright. It was concise, professional, and delivered a quiet, almost poetic sense of justice that brought a knowing smile to Eleanor's lips. Following their eviction from the Vance family mansion and their subsequent inability to sustain any form of luxury living, Marcus and Serafina, along with Isabella and Liam, had been forced to rent an apartment in a large, mid-range residential building in a less affluent part of the city. Eleanor, through her financial advisors, had been quietly tracking their movements, not out of malice or petty revenge, but out of a calculated understanding of the unfolding consequences of their choices, a detached observation of karma at work. Ms. Albright's email informed Eleanor that the aforementioned residential building had recently come up for sale. Its owners, a distant investment firm, were looking for a quick, uncomplicated sale. Without a moment's hesitation, and acting through a shell corporation to maintain absolute anonymity, Eleanor had instructed Mr. Henderson to make an aggressive, all-cash offer. The deal had closed last week. Eleanor Vance was now the sole owner of the entire building where her son and his family were tenants. Eleanor reread the last line of the email, her finger tracing the words on the screen. "We can proceed with the formal eviction notices at your earliest convenience, Eleanor." A faint smile, not unkind but utterly resolute, touched her lips. This wasn't about vengeance, not truly. It was about absolute clarity, about the universe correcting an imbalance. They had laughed when she was metaphorically homeless in her own family, evicted from their lives despite her boundless support. Now the tables had turned with a precision only true justice could deliver. Marcus and Serafina, meanwhile, were struggling immensely. Marcus had finally, reluctantly, taken a job as a low-level sales associate at an electronics store, a position he despised and was demonstrably terrible at, his charm failing to translate into actual sales. His once smooth, pampered hands were now callous from unloading boxes, his expensive suits replaced by ill-fitting department store attire. Serafina had attempted to start another online boutique, which failed even more miserably than the first, her lack of business acumen and complete misunderstanding of market dynamics proving to be insurmountable obstacles. She spent her days resentfully cleaning their modest apartment, a chore she had never had to perform in her life, and complaining bitterly about their diminished circumstances, about the unfairness of their fate. Isabella and Liam were attending community college, their dreams of elite universities shattered, working part-time jobs in cafes and retail stores to support themselves, a concept entirely foreign and humiliating to their privileged upbringing. They were forced to learn self-reliance, a harsh but necessary lesson, discovering the value of $1 for the very first time. Their calls to Eleanor had long since stopped, replaced by a bitter, simmering resentment that prevented any attempt at genuine reconciliation, any true introspection. The eviction notices arrived a week later, slipped under their apartment door. They were impersonal, cold from the management, informing Marcus and Serafina Vance that their lease would not be renewed and they had 30 days to vacate the premises. Marcus, reading the notice, felt a sickening déjà vu, a cold wave of recognition washing over him. It was the same cold, absolute finality he had heard in his mother's voice that day a year ago. Serafina shrieked, tearing at her hair, convinced it was just another cruel twist of fate, another random misfortune. They had no idea who the management truly was. They simply knew they were once again being cast out, forced to confront the harsh reality of a world that no longer bowed to their demands, a world where their privilege no longer existed. Eleanor, far removed from their despair, knew that true wealth was not measured in bank balances or luxury possessions, but in self-worth, peace of mind, and genuine connections. Her life was a testament to the profound truth that love and respect cannot be bought. They must be earned. And sometimes the most loving thing one can do, for oneself and for others, is to cut the cords of dependency, allowing everyone the painful but ultimately liberating opportunity to stand on their own. She had built her own new life, rich in purpose and contentment, having finally understood that the greatest loyalty one owes is to oneself, to one's own peace and dignity, and to the values that truly matter. This story of Eleanor Vance's quiet revolution is just one example of the powerful transformations that occur when individuals reclaim their power and demand the respect they deserve. If you found Eleanor's journey inspiring, or if it resonated with struggles you faced in your own life, you're in the right place. Our channel is dedicated to sharing stories of justice, resilience, and profound life lessons. Don't miss out on our next compelling narrative. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell, so you're always the first to know when we release a new video. Now we want to hear from you. Have you ever faced similar ingratitude or disrespect from someone you've supported? Or perhaps you've had to make a difficult decision to protect your own peace and well-being. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your stories are a powerful reminder that we are not alone in our struggles, and that sometimes, the greatest act of love is to love yourself first.